Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So I'm delighted to welcome Sean, the founder of Blue Wolf Assets. And Sean, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on my channel, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, cool. There's going to be a lot of value. So Sean, as always, if you could just give a 30,000 view of who you are and what you do.
Yep, so my name's Sean Bartle, Head of Business Development and co-founder of Blue Wolf Assets. So we're a property investment company based in the Southwest. Now, by trade, I'm an accountant, but don't judge me on that. I promise I've got a personality. We're not all the same. And we're just looking to sort of grow our business. We're relatively new. We've done a couple of deals and we're looking to scale up, continue to grow and take things from there.
Awesome. So Sean and I have spoken off camera, and the reason I wanted to get Sean on is because when it comes to property development, and I'm also going to be talking to other property developers, I think it's great to have people who are in the development sector, because I think we're able to squash a lot of noise and actually reveal a lot of the hardships that go into property development. And some of the questions today hopefully are going to answer the questions that many people come against when they just start out in property. So let's kick this off. Why property development when there are, let's face it, a million different strategies? What is it about property development that you have said, right, this is the business model we're going into?
So like you said, there are tons of strategies, and not even with just property, there are tons of asset classes out there. You know, people are in crypto, stocks and shares. So for me, property has stood the test of time as an asset class. It's not going anywhere. It's in huge demand. And within that, it's good to have a healthy mixture in portfolio. So whilst we're going to have some buy-to-let, some service accommodation, you know, the real aim is to get, you know, a piece of land, develop on it and be able to actually provide sustainable, nice homes for people that they're going to be able to enjoy living in.
Yeah, cool.
And I think also to add on that, you know, one of the key things is that you can make a real impact. And I think that's something that unfortunately not everyone focuses on, is actually being able to help other people.
Yeah. And one thing we are going to get into is, I think people like the idea of property development because they see the pound signs. I think that that really appeals to people. You know, buy-to-lets, they're a little bit mundane, a bit boring, a bit slow. You know, you get that little profit at the end of the month. If there is any profit, let's face it. Great place to put your money, but is there any profit at the end of it? Well, it's questionable nowadays. But property development, everyone hears about these big gross numbers. So we're going to get onto that. So for those watching, where are the beginning steps to getting into property and giving it the best go to become successful? What would your steps be?
I think the first thing is you've got to actually make sure you've got the right mindset and understanding in place first. It's very easy for people to see, you know, the big pound signs, as you just said, and sort of rush in head first without actually planning. And so I think making sure you've got a healthy relationship with money is a key thing. You know, how does it make you feel as an individual? Does it make you feel anxious? Are you concerned about it? Have you got poor money management yourself? Because if you have, you don't want to go down the property route, because if you can't manage your own money, you're not going to be able to manage a bigger pot, and you're not going to be able to manage other people's money if you're using joint venture finance, for instance. So I think that's the real starting point that people absolutely have to start at is, okay, what is my relationship with money? Once you've got that in place, you then need to actually get that core knowledge of property investing and property developing. So for me, I'm a big believer in mentoring up. So seeking out people that have already done what you've done, who are where you want to be, and actually getting them to teach you. Now, it can come at a cost. I think the key question to ask is, what is it going to cost you if you don't do it? And the answer to that is usually a lot more. So that's my sort of two key areas is the money and mindset side of things.
Yeah, that's really important. I think I'm glad you've brought up money management first off, because it's crazy, isn't it, when people start, not just in property, but it always amazes me where people want to start new ventures, they want to get into business, they've got a new idea, and then you start bringing it, you sort of start stripping that away, bringing it back to the basics of, okay, what, you know, how's your money management now? You know, have you got the basics set up? Are you in debt? And it's crazy, isn't it, when you think, you know, people turn around and they're like, oh, I've got a little bit of debt, oh my god, I'm a massive spender at the moment, but that's why I want to get into property, because then I can fulfill my spending needs. So really valuable points is mindset, money management, and you touched on it at the end there, which leads me into the next question quite nicely, is the education part of it, because this is something that's really, really key for any business, is that you are 100% aware, savvy, in the know, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So education is a big part. So it's quite nice. You're going to come from one side, I think, and I come from the other. I'm self-educated, but that comes at a cost of slightly, a little bit slower, depending how much effort you put into it. Obviously, I know, through a connection of ours, Liam Ryan as well, you've gone through his mentoring. Liam's a great guy. How have you found, taking on a mentor, and how important was that?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was really important. What you can learn from these guys can save you years and years and a lot of mistakes and a lot of money. Because the reality is, if you do go down the self-education route, you could still make errors. I mean, you could make errors at any point, but I think it's about reducing that risk. Having someone there who can not just give you that education, but actually hold you accountable, push you, make you go outside your comfort zone, for me is an absolute game changer. I think it comes down to the individual. Some people may not need that. But on the flip side of it, you have to think about what the implications could be if you don't do it. And I think getting the right education and the right person on board is also key. So I spent a lot of time looking at all the different property gurus out there. There's the area is unfortunately full of scam artists as well, which we don't need to go into. But you do really have to do the background checks and make sure you're comfortable with the person that you're going with. So yeah, for me, with Liam, really resonated with him. And, you get their key guys as well. It's not just them. You get all of their mentors within their power team. And all of a sudden, you've just got access to knowledge you didn't even know was out there. And kind of like you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So by having these guys on board, you suddenly start realizing actually just how little you know about something. And they can actually help you get to where you need to go a lot faster. So I'm a big fan of it, but within reason. I think, sometimes people go and spend money on this course, which could be serviced accommodation, and then 2 months later, they're on a HMO course. 2 months later, they're on a development one. It's like, no, you've got to have that plan of action, which feeds back into what I said, that at the very start, you need to make sure your mindset's right and that you've got a good understanding of the money mindset as well before you take action, because otherwise you can end up with a scattergun approach that's just never going to work.
Yeah, I think so. You've nailed it really on the head, is that there has to be a balance, because you just said it towards the end there. So many people start something and then they quit and then they start a new strategy. And that's I suppose it is a gripe of mine. When we talk about property, it's had so much marketing behind it that, again, it's kind of the default of to replace my job, or if I'm happy in a certain part of my life financially, I need to get into property. And there are so many strategies that I find a lot of people almost get sucked in and they don't know where to start, because they pay for this course, they pay for this course. And of course, excuse the pun there, is that there's always discounts if you take this course and then this course. So, you feel that you need to learn everything. And I think a really good mentor will say, what's your situation like? What's your money management? What's your mindset? What's the start, middle, and end goal? And then when you find that out, focus on one strategy and become an expert in that. And obviously you've gone down the property development. So I think it's really key for anyone watching this that wants to get into, say, property development, devote yourself to property development. Don't go scattering and doing the whole scattergun thing where you're doing this and you're doing that. Okay, cool. So we've kind of covered off education now. I think there is a healthy balance between the two. So when you've committed to property development, the next stage is, obviously you've got 3 elements, I would say. Proving to borrowers, to lenders, that you're someone who can borrow money. Number 2, is having the right deal. And then 3, we spoke off camera, the importance of knowing your numbers. So just addressing those 3 points. Once you commit to property development, what is the next stage to get your deals across the line?
Sure. So yeah, one of the things you mentioned is about being able to prove you can, have that money management, that you're not high risk. And so that's why it can be an advantage in some cases. Obviously, everyone's circumstances are different. But to actually start with getting a couple of buy-to-lets or doing a couple of flips, which is actually the route we've gone down. So, we've completed the first few deals, such as a flip, refinance, etc., that were not big developments, because it then gives you a bit of a track record as to, okay, well, we've done it on a smaller scale. We're now looking to do it on a bigger scale, but we've shown what we can do. And, knowing your numbers is absolutely essential, because if you get that wrong, you could go from thinking you're going to make a profit to all of a sudden being in the red, And if you're using joint venture finance, where you're going to pay your, funding partner back. And so again, it always comes back to those two key things, which is that mindset of it and the money management side of things. Knowing the numbers, you've got to be realistic with yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of people do struggle with that. They kind of see we should make 100 grand on it. But they know deep down that actually they've not put any contingencies in. They've gone for the very bare minimum of costs, and they've not factored in any external influences that could, hold the project up. The first lockdown, I mean, how many developers would have got caught out by that? Because no one was allowed on site and everything come to a halt. So it's about being realistic. It's about factoring in certain possibilities of, things going wrong, it not necessarily going smoothly all the time. And, just it's basically being smart, right? Have that contingency in place.
Yeah, I think, having a contingency is something, when I'm on calls with people, and we spoke about this on the phone, didn't we, is that where people fall short, and I see it time and time again, and they're on the phone, and this is why I'm really picky on now who I bring on the calls with certain individuals, is that if you're speaking to a lender who's been in the game for 20, 30 years, and now they're in a position just to lend their money, they will always address you and say, okay, what are you going to do if the market drops 10%? Because that's what I believe. You need to have an answer for that, and you need to have an action plan where you can say, okay, that's a fair enough point. I personally don't think it's going to drop 10%, but this is the contingency. This is where we are. We're liquid in the bank. We have cash to top up. If a pandemic happens, we're liquid to be able to financially support this project, see it through. You have to have an answer for everything when it comes to property development, because when it goes great, it can go brilliantly. You can earn an absolute packet, but when it goes wrong, it can go wrong. It can make you go bust. And I don't think
it can wipe you out,
it can wipe you out. So it's really important for those watching, know your numbers and be able to explain your project at its best case, middle case and worst case scenario to any lender, and being able to say your project like the back of your hand. Really important. Yeah. So let's talk about the juicy stuff when it comes to profits. Not so much the gross, because I know a lot of people throw gross numbers out there, 100, 150, 200k, I made a mil on it, stuff like that. What kind of profits do you look to take away from, run through a typical deal, and what would you like to walk away with net?
Sure. So we always ensure, and this relates to the last point we were just talking about, so it feeds into it quite nicely. We always make sure there's 2 exit plans on every deal we look at, and that the numbers have to stack for both exit strategies. So, if, for instance, and this can apply to anyone listening, let's say you're just looking at buying an apartment on its own, 2-bed apartment in a nice area. If it was us looking at it, we need to make sure that it works if we just flip it on its own. So we just get it, add that value to it and sell it on. Or if we go down the refinance route, either, BRR to buy to let or to SA, the numbers have to work. And if there's not 2 exit strategies where the numbers stack up, we won't touch the deal or even, entertain it. Now, you could argue we're potentially leaving money on the table, but, we need to be comfortable and disciplined, which is a key thing, that if something does go wrong, and as you just said, if you've got a joint venture partner who says, okay, well, I think the market's going to tank. What happens if that's midway through a project?
Yeah.
If you've only got one plan and it was a flip, but the market dips 10%, that flip may no longer work. So if you've got it down where you could also rent it out as an SA and actually still get that cash flow coming in, then you've still got that other option. So that for me is an absolutely key thing that we look at. In terms of returns, again, depending on the exit strategy, but if you're looking at a flip, you want that 20 to 25% return. On our first deal, we actually got 42%. So there was an element of luck to that, in that the property we were going for didn't sell at the auction. So we was willing to go up to a certain amount at the auction, and no one was bidding on it. So we actually held back and then approached after the auction, got it well below market value, added that value to it, and ended up having, an insane first deal. Now, you've got to be realistic, right? We're not going to achieve a 42% return on every deal we do. It would be nice, don't get me wrong, but it's not realistic. So I think it really depends on what your exit strategy is. But you're looking around the 20 to 25%.
Yeah. So I like your approach there with the 2 exit strategy, and if it doesn't work, because that's going to sit you really nice when it comes to lenders that you're playing. And it's so funny, isn't it? You know, a lot of people that I talk to that end up becoming successful or are on a really strong and solid journey towards achieving their own successes, there is a common theme amongst all, and you just said it as well, is discipline and having patience. You know, people say to me, why do I invest in gold? You know, so slow and so boring. Well, you know, it plays such a key part of when things are rocky, that will always carry on growing. You know, a 5,000 year chart does not lie, you know, from the beginning of time. So I think those that end up going on to be successful, and if you are watching this, is really learn to have patience in no matter what. And unfortunately, we're in a world, right, where everything's, you know, you've got to have it now. It's instant
gratification.
Yeah, it's instant. So some key points there, Sean. So awesome stuff. So we've covered off profits. Now let's touch on something that's really, really important, is security. And I know this is something where people have to jump hurdles, because not everyone owns their own house. Not everyone has buy-to-lets. Not everyone has got a track record. They might have the knowledge, they might have the money, but what's kind of typical in the sense of, well, you kind of need this for security?
Yeah, I think one of the key things with this is actually being able to negotiate, because, you know, for people that are in a position, as you said, they might not own their house, but they've got the knowledge and they now have the capital. You can't go and put your house up as, you know, collateral because you don't own it. So on the basis of not having any other assets, you would need to, if for instance you're using joint venture finance, perhaps negotiate with that joint venture partner. Look, you've already put your money in with me, so you show that you trust me for this first deal. Actually, is there any chance you can help with, you know, being used as collateral almost? Because, you know, you're assuming this is a high net worth individual, they're going to have assets. If they didn't trust you, they wouldn't have put the money with you in the first place. So that's potentially one avenue. You know, you've got to know your numbers. And if you're confident in yourself and the numbers, then actually, if you do have to put your house down as collateral or anything like that, you should be comfortable in doing it. And if there is something in your head that's telling you, I don't want to do it, it's too risky, then that would say to me that something's wrong with the deal. You've either not done your homework and you don't know your numbers, because if you do, you should have 100% confidence in what you're doing. And it shouldn't be an issue if you've got to put something you own on the line. I've personally done it myself. We'll probably be doing it on the current deal we're looking at as well. And, you know, if you're using bridging finance, for instance, they're going to want some sort of personal guarantee. And again, the second you hesitate on this, you're telling the other party that you're not confident in yourself and your ability. They're going to pull out of the deal. And if you've put money in already, such as surveys and solicitor fees, and that money's sunk, you're not getting it back. So it really does all really tie into, again, the numbers side of things, understanding money, having that contingency in place, 2 exit strategies on every deal, because you should then be able to back up what you're saying. And if you can't, you've done something wrong.
Yeah. Do you know, it's so funny. This is so important that everyone takes that on board, because this is such a slip up, is that if you're not willing to put your own money in or put some collateral on the line, that screams out to any lender, well, you don't believe in the project either. So you want all my money, you want my security, but you're not willing to put anything in. It's a dead deal. You know, it's done. It's not going to happen. You've just said it. If you don't know your numbers enough, or there is a gut feeling thinking, I don't want to put my house on the line, or I don't want to put my asset, because what if it does go? But don't bother going to a lender. Do not bother. Do not waste your time. The other thing there that you said there is, I was going to sneeze then, is that negotiating. So, you know, if you don't have your own house or you don't have any assets in the background, negotiating is a great way, because yes, lenders can also take a first charge on the site, right? But if you can negotiate an absolute bargain of a purchase, then there should be enough leverage and security on the site, plus additional equity in there, that you might not need to use any assets in the background, because there is enough security on that site and additional equity. So that's another way of looking at it. But like Sean has just said, you have to believe in your own deal, because otherwise don't even bother going to a lender. So Sean, there's obviously some fantastic tips on kind of getting into this property world. Just to finish off, before I want to sort of touch on the entrepreneurship that is needed to take on this huge task of being a property developer. Are there some sort of top tips, 3 top tips of someone watching this to go out and give it the best go to become a property developer?
Yeah, I think, one of the key things is you've got to be absolutely obsessed with it. It needs to be what you think and breathe all day, every day. Even if you're working full time in another job that's not related to property, and you're doing, perhaps committing 2-3 hours a day to this outside of work, which is, what I started doing. You need to make sure that you've got a clear plan and that the goals are realistic, but at the same time, not too easy. You need to actually be willing to put everything on the line to hit that success. So yeah, being obsessed with it is an absolute key thing. Discipline, which we touched on earlier, I think that's an absolutely fundamental skill that every business owner, entrepreneur, successful person has in common. You have to be disciplined in yourself and making sure that you are taking the right action, and also disciplined with money, which is, the cash flow stuff is absolutely essential. And if you're not disciplined with it, it's going to let you know, because you're going to lose money and you won't go forward. So they're my 2 key things, I think.
Yeah, top tips. And with the entrepreneurial spark that you clearly have, for someone, let's say you touched on it there, is if someone is working, how does someone realistically manage their time in order to make good enough strides to still be able to get into property development? Because obviously it is going to take a lot of education, it is going to take a lot of networking to be around people who are doing it, and that can be sometimes quite hard for people who are working full time. So what kind of manageable steps for someone who is working full time, what can they do in their spare time that is kind of really key? Or is it the mentor? What do they do?
I think the first thing anyone needs to do is actually assess and evaluate how you spend your time. Because you get a lot of people moaning, I don't have the time for this. But then when you drill down into what they do, they spend 2-3 hours a day watching Netflix.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, come on, mate. You clearly do have time. You're just not willing to commit. So, do a deep dive, an honest dive on yourself as to, okay, how am I spending my time? Some people might sleep 10 hours a day. Do you need 10 hours? Probably not. Most people don't. I certainly don't. I have about 4 hours a day, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm not saying to everyone do that, but that's what works for me. But, just have an assessment and say, okay, well, where am I wasting time? Am I sitting around playing the PlayStation, or am I watching Netflix? Because if you are, that time could be spent on learning. There's plenty of materials online. If you've not got the money to go and mentor up at a high level, we have something called YouTube, and there's plenty of people out there that put a lot of good content on there where you can go and learn the basics. There's books available, which, you can just go and get. They're not expensive. Do a deep dive into that and start researching and building that foundation. Because building that foundation of knowledge is key, similar to building a house, right? You don't start with a roof, you start with a foundation. That's how you need to look at building a business. Is get that foundation in place, get that knowledge in, and start scaling up from there. Don't try and sprint before you can walk.
Yeah, top tips, which leads me on to, one of my final points, which I like to take away from all guests is, has there been a certain book or something that you've taken away? Was there a program, a series, or someone on YouTube that you would say, go check it out because there's so much information? Is there anything you could recommend?
I first read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 14, and that just was a real eye opener for me. It was a great book. I actually prefer his other book, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the cash flow quadrant. Yeah. And that's a deep dive into actually whether you're an employee, self-employed business owner, or investor, and why you need to be in certain quadrants. So both of those are a great place to start. In terms of mindset, I'm a big fan of the 10X rule by Grant Cardone. It's a must read for anyone because it will make you realize how small you're thinking. And actually, once you start thinking bigger and aiming bigger, you start noticing the results around you changing completely. It happened for me and it can happen for anyone else. In terms of property books, there's a lot out there. So it's going to depend on the strategy that you're going for, right? Because you don't want a scattergun approach with it. So I would say once you know what area you want to look into, then start researching who the big guys in the game are, because they'll guarantee they would have put a book out on this area. And then you've got someone that you know is almost mentoring you through a book.
Yeah.
And then online material, it can be expensive, but there's Cardone University is fantastic. There's, property, mindset, motivation, sales, negotiation. There's a lot of courses on there, and so I would recommend going there. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, YouTube's just got endless content. One thing I do truly believe in is that you shouldn't study tons and tons of people, because you're going to end up with so much information and so much conflicting data that you're not going to know which avenue to go down.
Yeah.
Which is why you have to come back to that mindset, money mindset game. So understanding your goals as a mindset, and then your relationship with money as a second mindset. Get your plan in place, then seek out the person who's absolutely dominating it within that area. That needs to be your mentor, whether it's direct or whether it's through books and online material is irrelevant. That needs to be the person that you study, and not everyone else in the field, because, you know, one person will tell you to use debt, another person will tell you that's the worst thing to do. Well, if you're studying both of these people intently, you're not going to take any action because you've got conflicting data. And I think that's somewhere a lot of people go wrong, is that they hear Joe Bloggs has done well, so they go and study that person. Then they hear that person's done really well, so they go and do a deep dive on that. And these two people don't align at all. And you just end up in a stagnated place.
Yeah, you don't know where you're going. And that, I've said that many a time. If there's someone who's giving you too many ways to make money, you have no idea where to start. You have to, like you say, hone in and then focus on that one core topic, you know, industry or whatever you're going into. That was amazing. What I want to finish on, Sean, just before we take some details of where people can reach out to you, is I just want to throw a bit of a motivation, inspiring number out there. What's kind of the biggest profit you're going to go for being in a property development industry? What are you going to go for in one project?
In one project, if the eventual aim is to be hitting 7 figures on a development deal, right? I would expect that we are there within the next 3 years.
Yeah.
So putting a lot of pressure on myself and the guys involved with me. But at the end of the day, you know, if you don't go for it, you've got no chance of getting anywhere. So, yeah.
Well, pressure's on now, Sean, because you've said it. So
that's it. It'll be on the internet, and I'll be holding myself accountable. Don't worry about that.
3 years, we want to see that $1 million plus profit gross. Let's keep it with gross. Then you've got pressure, but you've not got too much pressure. Cool. Sean, where can people reach out to you, mate, if they want to get in touch?
Sure. So if on Instagram, if you go to Blue Wolf Assets, we put a lot of content out there regularly. You know, it's all about giving value. So we're not trying to do any sales pitch on it. It's literally that these are our thoughts on money, motivation, and property. Take from it what you find useful, and obviously let me know if you do. Personal profile is Sean Bartle 91. That's just more my sort of day-to-day activity, the family stuff. But, you know, always happy to connect with people. And again, you know, same place on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. There's been huge amounts of value in this episode, so I think there's going to be a lot of takeaways. Can't wait to share it with people. Sean, again, thanks so much for coming on, and everyone that's watched, we will see you all very soon.